Welcome to the It's Time podcast with your host, Professor Dale Feinauer, from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.
Welcome to another of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs podcasts. I'm really excited for our podcast today because this time we have not just one guest, but we have a guest and we have two folks interviewing. The exciting part about today is Jim Ransom and I will be teaming up to interview Bryan Brandt, who is our guest. Now, as Jim and I do this, we're really going to be paralleling a lot of what we do in our executive MBA program, where we often team up an academic with a practitioner. And we like to think of it as the academic doing the play-by-play and the practitioner providing color commentary. So we'll see if that's how it plays out today or not. But Jim will be helping us today in the interviewing phase, and that's partially because he and Bryan go back a long way. Bryan and I have just met, so he'll be able to provide some additional insight and color to this process. Jim, would you mind introducing Bryan?
I sure will. And first of all, thanks, Dale, for setting this up. And I'm fortunate to have done one of these podcasts this week already, and it's a lot of fun. And hopefully everyone listening and watching gets a lot out of this. But more importantly, as you said, Bryan and I have known each other for a long, long time, probably 20 plus years now. And Bryan currently is the Senior VP and an officer of the Oshkosh Corporation in all kinds of different roles and is involved in all kinds of different functions at Oshkosh, but an officer at a big-time public company. Prior to that, he and I worked together at Bemis, now Amcor, for about 12 years. And Bryan was one of the key guys on my team as an officer in that company as well. And again, leading all kinds of different things. But my favorite role I ever put Bryan into, which somehow will come up over the course of this podcast, was Vice President of Transformation, which neither of us, probably to this day, know exactly what that meant. But we had acquired a very large company and integrated a whole series of companies into one cultural pile. And I asked Bryan to lead that, which was probably one of the more complicated requests I've ever given anybody, which is why I think he's sitting here today, because he's got the raw leadership skill sets that help pull us through all that. Bryan's also part of all kinds of charitable things. I know part of United Way, part of the Oshkosh Corp Foundation team, and I don't know if I've missed anything, Bryan, other than you get it. One of the real inspirations in my leadership journey, quite frankly. And so, with that, I'll turn it back to Dale.
Well, Bryan, Jim has described you as one of the most admirable leaders that he's had, that he thinks of you as having some really strong leadership skills. Tell me about the journey. What has progressed in your life that has led you to where you are now as a leader? What are those experiences?
First of all, thanks for having me. I think this is great, and it's iron sharpening iron constantly on leadership. So this is fantastic, and it's fun to be with Jim here. Also, he's been a huge mentor of mine for many, many years. It goes in phases, and I'd have to say, starting out, it really started back growing up playing hockey, and the amount, and it's so funny because hockey, the game of hockey it's not a perfect game, and how you bring your attitude and how you respond to the imperfections is what happens in life also. And you can be a really good individual player, but the team won't win unless you're a really good team member too. And the influences around that has been huge. And there's just huge life lessons there. I was fortunate to have my dad, who was a huge mentor of mine, be my coach for many years. And he brought the philosophy from the farm of it's never too windy to pick rock. So that means you can always be out there working. Hard work will beat talent that doesn't work hard every day. And he talked about good players make themselves better. So you have to be working on your own individual game. But he said great players make their teams better. And so if you really want a team to be successful, you have to be a great team member. And then you looked at the game itself, and it's not a perfect game, and how you respond to those imperfections is huge, and individual players has a huge influence on what happens with the team. So influence is a major part of leadership, and you can influence people in a positive way or in a negative way. And so as I started getting in, I saw that through my hockey career. I had teams that we won national tournaments that we didn't have the most skilled players, but we were connected as a team, a strong unity, and it didn't matter what obstacle. We were going together, and we were going to bounce or just knock it down and go right through it. I was on super high-level skill teams where one thing happened and the team imploded because people would start getting on each other and it would implode. And so I really started just watching that a lot more. I was captain of teams. I didn't really know what the role of the captain was. One thing I love doing is just watching people, observing leaders. And I had a couple of moments in my business career that just were these milestones of influence, where I saw that it doesn't matter what your title is, how much power someone can have with pure influence. One was a sales trip to the Scott's Company in Columbus, Ohio. Jim, I'm not sure if you're on this one or not. We went to the Columbus Blue Jackets game. It was an inaugural season for the Columbus Blue Jackets NHL team. And it was a brand new arena with like a 5-star restaurant in there. And there was a bar in there. So we took the team to the hockey game. After the game, we were in the bar. And I had to use the restroom. So I'm walking through the restaurant to the restroom. There's a big table with all these business people, pretty intense. And as I'm walking by the table, the guy at the head of the table grabs my arm. And I turn and look at him, and he says, and he points to this gal next to him and says, she ordered a White Russian, and it's horrible. What are you going to do about that? And I looked at him, and I said, well, that's unacceptable. So I said, let's see if we can get this fixed. So I grabbed the drink, and I went up to the bar. It was right behind, and I said, hey, this gal at this table here had ordered a White Russian. It's not good. Can you try again? And he goes, sure. He goes, are you at the table? And I said, no, I'm just a guy heading to the bathroom. And he starts,
you as a waiter or something?
Well, yeah. I looked around.
You do look a little like a waiter.
I had a white dress shirt on from the business meeting, dark slacks. Yeah. And I saw the whole wait staff is that. So the bartender starts laughing. And he's like, I'll take care of it. I said, not on my watch. I'm in now.
This is me.
Yeah,
I'm owning it.
Yeah. So he fixes a new one. He goes, try this. I said, okay. I might come back like 3 or 4 times if you don't get this. So I go back there, and this table is just intense. You can just feel that this guy's power hungry. And so I go to the gal. I said, oh, here, try this one. If it's not right, we're going to keep coming back until you love this thing. And she was pretty embarrassed, so she tries it, and she goes, this is good. This is fine. And so then the guy at the head of the table said, something, I want you waiting on our table for the rest of the night. And I said, well, I can't do that. And he goes, no. I got power here. I know the owner. I can get that done like that. I said, well, I don't work here. He goes, what do you mean you don't work here? I said, I'm here on a business trip. I was in the bar. I'm heading to the restroom. He goes, well, why would you stop? I said, well, it looked like you needed help. He busts out laughing, stops the whole table, and starts telling this. And he's laughing. Everyone's laughing. And he tried to hire me on the spot and stuff. And I wish I would have kept his card as a waiter, as his head waiter. Yeah. But it was this intense table that I turned it. I wasn't trying to, but turned it in a heartbeat. And I had full attention to everyone. And I was just thinking, wow, it's amazing how no title, anything like that, you can influence people really quick in a positive way. Turn the table. The other one was I was on a sales trip coming back, long sales trip, just trying to get home. Got to go through Chicago. Don't know if the flight's going to make it every time you go through Chicago. And I'm sitting in the back of the plane in the aisle, middle seat's open, someone's in the window seat. And in my head, I'm thinking, man, I just hope nobody sits in the middle seat. Same thing right in front of me. A guy's in the aisle, no one's in the middle, someone's on the window. And the guy actually in front of me actually says to the guy in the window and says, man, I hope no one sits in my middle seat. And I was just thinking that. So I'm like, yeah, me too. right when he said that, boom, you hear the step on the plane. You hear the breathing. And I look over, and there's just a large lady sweating who had just running to the plane to make the plane, starting to squeeze down the aisle. And I'm like, oh, man, do not sit next to me. And I'm just going, please don't sit next to me. She stops right in front of me, and I'm just like, oh, I look up, and she talks to the person in front of me who just verbally said a minute ago, I hope my seat's open. And she goes, I'm in the middle seat. And I'm like, it's not mine. This guy who just verbalized it pops up and turns into like this 5-star hotel concierge. He's like, oh, here, looks like you were hustling to the plane here. Here, sit down. I'll get your bag up. Finds a spot for the bag. Bag's right up there. I'll get it down for you before you leave. And she's looking for the extension seat belt. And he's like, I'll go up and get it. He runs up, gets it, hides it, gives it back. And for the hour flight is talking to her about her life, what she was doing. And I was sitting back just thinking about what I was thinking when she was coming down, how this lady probably hates flying. Because every time she steps on the plane, everyone's looking at her like I was looking at her. Please don't sit by me.
And she's got to know it.
And she's got to know it. Yeah. She probably hates to fly because of that reason. And this guy probably gave her the best flight she's ever had, filled her with energy, where she went home and probably was just fired up and pumped up. And so it was those two moments where you can influence someone and give them power to do something, give them the courage, the confidence to go places that they never thought they'd go. So the power of influence. So I love watching that. The next phase that I'm in right now, this is part of it, is I didn't realize that you could really study leadership. And so I was asked by Dr. Dennis Episcopo, the senior pastor at Appleton Alliance Church back 20 years ago, to be a part of a leadership class he's putting on. He's got his doctorate in leadership. And we started reading books, Maxwell and Lencioni, and started talking about this. And I'm like, oh my God, you can actually build leadership skills up through this. And that's what we're doing here. And it's a lifelong journey. And so since then, when I started working for Jim too, it wasn't about just numbers and how do we talked leadership. And he was the first boss I had where we actually talked leadership. And so I find it fascinating as far as just being able to take people, a group of people from a place that they're really comfortable with to a new place where you have to something better for the group, and how you get them there is fun to do.
Let me ask you about that. Since we've had so much time together over 20 years, not so much the last 5, but there's kind of 2 schools of thought, and you know exactly where I'm going with this. And it's some leaders are kind of fear to perform type people. Many leaders in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early, that was
command
the
and control. Absolutely.
Fear to perform. Or there's the sort of inspire success. And they're 2 pretty different paths. And they both can work, but one's sustainable and one isn't. What have you seen? I know what path you're on, Bryan.
Yeah.
When you think about those 2 things, why does one work and why does one not, in your view?
Yeah, well, it really depends on, because you can get the numbers through either way. Yeah. You can get the numbers. To me, it's what are you? There's a bigger picture, something that, do you want just the numbers at the end of the day, or do you want to make a difference in people's lives? Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, what are they going to remember? Oh, we made that quarter. Mm-hmm. Remember when we made that quarter? No, they're going to remember. This guy changed my life. He challenged me. Yeah. Took me from a spot where I didn't have the courage to do something to I'm actually doing it now. Or, and we've had tons of those conversations. And so how do you actually make a difference in the lives of people and get the numbers? And you can do it. And I heard someone talking today saying, well, you need the financials first before you can take care of people. Well, can't you take care of people? They'll take care of the customer, which will take care of the shareholders, and then we can give it back to the community. I think you can do that too. So it's to me, it's what the end goal is for you personally. Both can be successful, but if you want to get there with a group of people in a very healthy way that then they are doing the same thing to a group of people and you're actually changing almost society around it? Or are you trying to burn people up just to get numbers?
Well,
and at the end of the day,
it won't work. I mean,
nobody remembers. I mean,
I've been retired for 5 years, so I'm getting further and further away from all of the grind, and your perspective changes quite a bit.
Yeah.
And one of the big changes is that the only way to get results is through inspiring people to levels of happiness, performance, success, stability, whatever it is, that they couldn't get to if you weren't in their life. That gets you the results.
Right.
And eventually everyone kind of figures that out, and they do it a little bit differently. And I think what I've watched in the community, what's gone on at Oshkosh Corp the last 5 years, has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Because that's been sort of the stated change in your business. And you look at the performance of the company's just been like unbelievable. And I think back over the last 4 or 5 years, it looks like the input was people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it looks like from an outsider.
And that so going back to your sort of the command and control, that was where I sign your checks. You're going to do what I say, and you might get 5 to 10% out of those people. When you inspire them, you don't have to pay them a thing, and they will go through walls for you.
Right.
And it's amazing how much more. Now you're talking 50% because their minds are expanding. They're more creative. They're more innovative. It goes back to sports. If you play tight, you don't play as effective. If you play loose and are creative and you have people's backs, and that's the thing. I mean, I know McKinsey did studies on strategic plans and engineering products, M&As, and I think they came up with it's like 70% failure rates.
It is.
And it's not because
acquisitions,
strategic plans. And it wasn't because the strategic plan wasn't scripted out perfectly and wordsmithed to death. And it wasn't because the due diligence wasn't done to the 4th decimal point. The plans were fine. And it was because of the people. And the people didn't execute the plan. And why didn't they execute? Probably because the leadership wasn't there to get them. They got stuck at a certain place. And that's the thing. People will get stuck. And it's the leader's job to get them unstuck and motivate them, whether it's understanding, a belief, taking action, being an advocate for others. And but what happens usually is if they're not executing, we got to change people. We got to change them out. They can't do it. Versus what is the root cause? Why are they stuck? I mean,
how do you think about this? In my version of that is, as you've heard 1,000 times out of me, if you jump to execution without alignment, you're dead. If you jump to alignment without being clear, you're dead. And we find ourselves all the time jumping to execution, and we skip the alignment piece, and the clarity isn't there. So it kind of falls apart, and then we blame it on people.
Right.
Do you see that? Is that getting worse or better? How do you look at that now? Versus when we work together?
I think the conversation has changed a lot more. That it's trying to change, and there's lots more books written on it and things like that. But doing it is still hard because the quarter's coming to an end. We need to execute. We need it quicker than what we even thought. So taking shortcuts, which to me is being undisciplined and impatient. So when it comes to even clarity and alignment, so there's a progression when it comes to transformation. Change by itself is situational. You can change, something just like that. When you introduce people, it's transformation. It's psychological. And so you need to bring people through a journey of first they're aware. Maybe. So a lot of people, we sent the email out. Well, how many people opened the email? How many people read it? How many people? So they might be aware. So how do we get them to understanding? So you might get them to understanding. People are like, no, they understand. Yeah, they understand. But they're like, can you believe what these guys are trying to do?
Flavor of the month.
And they know they can repeat to verbatim, what it is. They totally understand it. They don't believe it. So how do you get them to believe in this? And then you don't want them just to believe it, saying, hey, Bryan, what you're doing is great. Keep going. I'm like, No, I need you on the field with me. So how do you get them to take action? And then how do you get them to be the leaders so you don't have to hit all 15,000 people? They can hit the next 100 people, and then those 100 are hitting the next 100 and going. And so taking on that journey, it's dealing with people. I mean, I've said this many times. After 10, 15 years of doing this, I finally figured out people are different.
There is no single right answer.
They got different backgrounds, ethnicity, religion, how they were brought up, race, single parent homes. You name it. They have all this baggage. They have different personalities, and each personality communicates totally different. They're looking for different things. And so as a leader, how do you connect with those people so they get through that spectrum to that belief, and then hopefully they're pulling people with at that point, becoming advocates. And I think there's a stat out there that people have 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% are negative. That's
interesting observation.
That's before you introduce change. And so people will get to, understanding belief, and you got them. So, okay, I got Jim today. Tomorrow I'm going to work on Dale. And then I come back in and Jim's gone the next day. He's like, I don't get what we're doing. Well, wait a second. I thought I just had you. Something happened, negative thoughts. They start creating stories. And so they got stuck. So do I replace Jim, or do I say, no, remember, this is what it was. This is what we talked about. And then usually you have a 5-minute conversation and they're like, oh, that's right. I got it. I'm good.
How do you balance those two options? So you're trying to inspire. You're trying to motivate. You're doing everything you can. At some point, you might have to say, as much as I want to focus on the troops and making sure they're happy campers and everything's good, here's the goal. You're not making the goal. We've worked on it. This relationship isn't working. How do you balance building that relationship with at some point the needs of the organization if it's not working?
Yeah, to me, that's part of evaluating talent and understanding what is behind it. Is it a skill that they don't have? Is it? It's really looking at the resistance of why they're not doing it. Are they a part of the solution? Are they? Can they get there from a skill set standpoint, or are they just a negative person saying, "I'm not doing this"? And at some point, you may need to make a call on that, and you better do it quick. If you see someone that, so there's two things with that, and I've seen it both ways. If you see someone that's so negative, that's a huge influencer, and we talked about influence.
Yep. I
love going after them first, because if you can get them, you get a whole army with them.
So you try and sell them and get them with the program.
Yep.
Because if you can get Bob, who's known as the most resistant cuss in the building, there are going to be a lot of other people.
They'll pull a whole army with them. And if you don't try it and just get rid of them without even having that conversation, they will influence all those people still from behind the scenes.
Assuming you work really hard to bring Bob along.
And if they're not there, then you make a call and people understand that you're serious. If you're not heading in this direction and you're going to be here, there will be decisions made around that.
And so the willingness to make that very hard decision that this person isn't going to be a good fit, not worth the investment, we've tried everything we can, that's important to getting other people to be with the change program.
That's a huge, if you don't do that, then you allow that toxicity in the locker room, you're just killing the culture that you're trying to build.
So you've got to at some point make those hard decisions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To me, I like working on that as part of that first guiding team is handpicking those people that are going to put up the stink, that have an army that they're influencing already. Because if you can get them, your work is a lot easier going forward.
Let me ask another version of that. And Dale asked me this question when I was sitting in that seat the other night. What are some of the regrets you have as leader? You've been around for a long time. And one of mine still is, that I probably spent too much time trying to fix the red employee instead of growing, nurturing, and leading the green leader. We've talked about this many, many, many times. And we all fall into the trap of trying to solve problems, especially guys like you and I who think we can solve them all.
Right.
And I think if I don't know, regret's the right word, but Bryan, how do you think about the fact that you can spend an hour trying to fix somebody, and that's an hour you didn't spend trying to inspire somebody? How do you balance that? Because it's hard, man.
Yeah. The examples I always look at is like the Terrell Owens, Antonio Browns in the NFL.
My goodness, yeah.
The best receivers on the field. And the most toxic in the locker room, and those teams never won with them. I mean, Terrell Owens, finally, he was the best receiver in the NFL and could not find a team.
For a lot of years.
Yeah. And it goes, I mean, you had instances of salespeople where they're bringing in the most sales, but they're just creating havoc with the rest of the team.
So cultural fit trumps technical skills.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's got to be a combination of the two. It's not one or the other. And you're looking for the sweet spot. Again, a better team versus individuals. The better team's gonna do more for the business as a whole than one individual that they're going to get their bonus every year. But if it's creating just chaos with everybody else as a company, you're not going to reach the goals that you're going for. And so those are the ones that are to me, that's the toughest decision a leader has to make.
I'm going to take you back 20 years.
Yeah.
And again, none of this is pre-rehearsed, so he didn't know this question's coming. Do you remember the first person you fired?
Yes.
And you remember what I put you through?
Yep.
What did you learn from that? 'Cause that was rough. That was rough.
Well, yeah. I mean,
you were 30 years old at the time.
Yeah.
Or younger. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it was the right decision. The biggest thing that I learned was the importance of giving feedback throughout. It's not an event at the end, and that's part of the culture that leaders need to establish in the behaviors. It's not, no, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. And then when crunch time happens and financials are we got to maybe do some cuts, first person cut, and they're like, why am I getting cut? Well, you haven't been doing this. Why didn't you ever tell me? And now they're 45, close to 50, and they've been just barely poking along, and no one gave them any feedback until the day that they get released. And so that was the biggest thing was you have to be candid and crystal clear because that gives them the opportunity to improve.
Right. You owe it to them.
Yeah. Give them, and then if they decide, then it's how are you going to respond? A life lesson again. You got the feedback. How are you going to respond? And if, piss and moan and say, you guys don't know what you're talking about, well, that's a decision a manager can make, a leader can make. Or if they're like, oh, that's what the expectation is. I got it. I'm going to work my butt off to get there. So I think that's the biggest thing I learned. The other thing was once you make that decision, it's important to have a really, really good process. We went through one reduction way back when, and those are so tough. And it wasn't Jim; it was somebody else that said, "I never want to be good at these." And I corrected him, saying, "No, I never want to do these. But if we do these, we should be really good at them, because we want people to hold their head up high when they're walking out, and to turn to the leader and say." If there's another opening in the future, can I come back? Type of thing, because those reductions where you have to do a bigger group, those are tough to do. But gosh, you should do them really well, very respectful, and making sure that the clarity is there with the leader as far as why the decision was made. Leader needs to pull out and let HR do its work.
When that gentleman grabbed you by the arm and said, this young lady's White Russian is terrible, why didn't you say, not my problem, buddy. I'm over here. I'm not the wait staff. What caused you to take that and own it?
Yeah. It wasn't the adult beverages that I had before. So
no influence at all.
No influence at all. Something I've always just enjoyed people, and I always watch people, how they react and do things. And some people get so intense, and this person was, you could feel the tension at that table. And some reason, and I've told the story too, and I remember my dad saying, "Why did you do that?" And I'm like, I don't really know, but it was in the moment. And I'm like, all right, this is unacceptable. So let's fix this thing. And I was sort of having fun with them. And when the bartender started laughing and stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm gonna follow this thing through and see what happens.
So to some extent, if I'm hearing you properly, there was clear tension at the table you perceived. You didn't like that tension. And to you, it was a challenge of, can I find a way to get rid of this tension?
Yeah, and it's and again, the power of influence. Everybody can influence people every single day, at every single moment, in a positive way or a negative way. And you get to intentionally choose that, or you just can let it happen. To me, I think, and it's a mindset and attitude that you get to choose every day. You get to control two things in life: your attitude and how you respond to things. Everything else is just sort of circumstances that sort of play out. And so that's something that I've tried to build that muscle up, is to make sure I have a positive attitude. And there's always another option. And I talk to my team all the time too, is if something happens, it's not pass fail. It's okay, how do you process it? And what are you going to do? How are you going to respond now?
What's the next move?
Yep. What's the next move? Because quitting is failing. If you don't quit, then it's not failing. You're learning, and how do you keep growing? And you get stronger and learn a lot more from things that did not go well than the things that go well.
We can come back to the things that didn't go well, but what do you look for in a leader? So you're involved in situations where you're making decisions. Do we promote somebody into this leadership role? What tells you, I think they got a shot?
So I was running sales at the time, and I had either a sales manager or a director position open. And I'm in my office, and the top salesperson walks by my office, and they were unbelievable. They were the top salesperson, great closer. Pokes his head in my office and says, "Hey, that sales manager role you got, I want to throw my name in the hat for that." And he's about to keep walking, and I said, "Hold on a second, come back in here. Do you actually think I have a hat with a bunch of names in it, and I'm going to just pick one out of the hat, and they get the sales manager role?" And he's like, "No, you know what I mean. I'm one of your top closers." I said, "Okay, keep closing." I said, "What? I don't know what your question is." He goes, "Well, this is my next step." I'm like, "Why?" And so I said, "I'm going to give you a chance. Go back out of my office." I said, "Come back in and talk to me about what you're going to do to build an army of closers, because you know how to close so well. You're going to build an army of closers and teach all these people how to do it." So usually the question is around if it's a leadership role and their first sentence has nothing to do with people, I don't know if they're the leader. Because it's not about doing stuff at that time. It's about leading. It's about coaching. It's not about doing stuff. And I've done the quad charts with them and saying, where are you spending your time? Are you actually doing stuff? Are you leading? Are you coaching? Or are you managing? And managing is expense reports and making sure you got your strategy done and stuff like that. But if you're leading and coaching, you're creating an army in an environment where the whole team is going to grow, versus going on a sales call with a sales rep and going to close the deal for them. And now I need the sales manager to go on every call to close deals. So I want the leader has to be thinking about taking a group of people, creating a vision of where they're going to take this group of people. And if you come in my office and start talking about how you're going to do that for me, geez, I'll give you all day to talk about that. And I'll probably give you the job right there, because that will take a whole bunch off my plate if you can do that. And so to me, that's the first thing. Leadership is about taking a group of people from one place to another place, And a leader's got to have a vision for it. I mean, it starts with vision, starts with people. And then, I mean, the question is, why would people follow you?
And now, a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
Powerfully positioned, strategically designed, results-driven. That's what sets the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Master of Business Administration program apart in Northeast Wisconsin. Our MBA professional program offers flexible course options to meet the needs of working professionals seeking career advancement. Take the courses 100% online, in person during the evenings in Appleton or Oshkosh, or a combination of both, and earn your MBA in as little as 2 years. No GRE or GMAT required. It's time to achieve more with a graduate degree from UW-Oshkosh. Visit uwo.sh/MBA to learn more. That's uwo.sh/MBA. Visit today.
So I'm working for you, and I'm really good. I'm your great closer. And you identify that I wouldn't make a great sales manager because I'm not good at leading people. It's not what I do. This is all about me. How do you keep that person motivated? I really wanted to be the sales manager. It was the next step in the hierarchy, and up seems to be a good thing. How do you motivate? How do you keep on board that person?
Yeah, I would start just by talking about, okay, if you think that's the next, why do you want that? And it really goes back to the why. What are you looking for in your career and your journey? So if it's a title, you can probably stay in an independent role and have a different title. We can work on that.
We'll call you what you want.
But if you don't want to have anything to do with people and building a whole army of people, that's going to be the most frustrating job you've ever had in your life. Because people are hard. They're different. They change their minds constantly. They're going one day and then 60,000 thoughts and 80% negative. The next day they're not there. And I've seen it throughout my career where people want to be a leader or a manager of people, and they get in there and they are so stinking frustrated. And that can create toxic teams out there too, and can start wearing on the culture that you're trying to build. And leaders dictate the culture. I mean, how leaders behave.
So I'm hearing trying to help them understand what they want and let them potentially come to the conclusion, turns out I really don't want to be a leader. What can we do to make this being a salesperson role more interesting to me?
Yep. I mean, there's different types of roles that you can set up. And that's, to me, that's the thing is you never want the team to be stagnant saying this is locked in and this is the way it is. You're looking at where the business is going, what's the business need. And then you start looking at the talent that you have and saying, how do I create the best team I can to get there and to be flexible? Well, I mean, my career, gosh, I counted the other day. I think I've had like 17 some different titles in my career, and 15 of them have been created. There was no job there before, and it was because the business needed this. Let's create this role and go versus no, there's no job there, so we can't do something.
But you know why that is true, and I'll do this for you because you're too humble. If you've had 17 jobs and 15 of them were created, because you and I work together, I know the answer to this, is those jobs didn't exist because they were almost entirely leadership-based positions. So there was not a natural org structure box to follow. And who do you put in boxes that don't exist? Raw leadership. You don't put in, it's not a hero, a skill set, some level of, technical competency. When you get into the roles that are created, you're usually, at least in my world, you're looking for who could actually lead in a pretty undefined area, create clarity, get people lined up, lead with humility, and get them to execute. That is about as rare as it gets, which is why you're sitting here. We just don't have many people, Dale, that can do that. And it's probably getting fewer and fewer. And I want to go back to something Dale asked and what you look for in leaders. That's what I always looked at, which is why I always had all arrows kept pointing back to you in the 20 years we worked together, because you sort of had the EQ and the humility to pull all that off and deliver. Because let's be clear here.
Yep.
If you have these incredible leadership attributes and you're the guy people follow. You're the guy people join, not just follow. Right. And you can't deliver, you won't be around long.
Right.
And I think it's a great question. You were asking earlier, how do you create that constant balance between delivering results, creating accountability, which always has an edge to it, and being that humble servant leader? When you think about those two things, especially being in 15 jobs that were created, how do you do that, Bryan?
Yeah, and
how do you create that balance in an undefined role, particularly?
To me, some people like that based on their personality, and some people are going to run screaming on that one. But to me, I don't think they're two separate things. I mean, people want. We did when Wilson took over CEO of Oshkosh. We did all sorts of research around this, and I mean, people want two things. They want meaningful work with people that care about them. If you give them that, they are going to take on the world for you.
Research is clear. Those are the two variables that matter.
And when it comes to leadership, I think Mayo Clinic put out something saying that your leader has more influence on the health of people versus your doctor.
Like 6-1.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's, and so we just talked about if we take care of the people, give them clarity. It goes back to clarity of what their role is and the value that role delivers to the organization and what is needed for them to accomplish and putting the milestones together so they can do it. I think that's the other thing too is a lot of companies will say we got to do everything and it's due tomorrow and then push it on the organization to figure it out versus it's usually the same resources that are on every single project and they don't look at the resource allocation. They don't look at, on the calendar, how do we slide one this way, one that way? We don't, you take on too much and you don't just lop off 80% and say, we're just going to focus on 20%.
Get her done
really well. And then to me, I took over continuous improvement for one of the jobs that I took on. And it wasn't about how much continuous improvement projects we worked on. We actually stopped 80%. We focused on 20%. And the key to the whole deal was getting 20% and then holding the gain. And then get another 20% and hold the gain. Because what happens is you do this huge continuous improvement. Let's do a gazillion of these things. And it goes up and then it creeps right down.
You get
and then
change, it's but then it boomerangs back.
And then it's, wait, what did we do 2 years ago? Let's do that again. And then it does this versus let's focus on 20% and hold it. And it's a performance control system. It's a culture. Then it's the culture as far as pulling forward. Okay, what's next? Let's take on what's next. You can do it, and we saw it in plants. You do it in a pilot area, and you get the team focused, and now they're working in an area that's clean and more productive, and the people that were resistant are like, wait a second, I want to work in an area
that's
like
cool.
That
looks cool.
Can you do that over at, and then you start getting more momentum and you hit a tipping point then finally, and it all starts flushing through. But I think you have to hold people accountable still. We have what we call a people first culture at Oshkosh Corporation. It doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable. It doesn't mean that we give people everything that they ever ask for. We listen to them, and then we still make decisions that make sense for the business. And we're caring for the people because we see the results that if we create an environment where they're cared for and they're given clarity as far as what they should work on, the creativity and the innovation just skyrocket.
Let me ask you about that. You said caring. Pretty critical, right? The old, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
We've talked about that for years. If you look at the current research, some of what you shared with me when you were guest speaking is that somewhere between 60 and 70%, it's probably higher now in the middle of COVID and post-COVID, 60 to 70% of all employees go home unfulfilled.
Right.
Basically unhappy. So call it 2/3 of the U.S. workforce goes home every night or comes home every morning unhappy, unfulfilled. Why is that? And it clearly is worse. I mean, 4 million people switched jobs in the month of September.
Now they have an opportunity to.
And now in October, the same thing happened. I don't know about November yet, but the amount of turnover going on right now is just, nobody's seen anything like it. And that's before that's subsequent to these numbers. Why do you think that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying that I use, and somebody else came up with it, but there's a whole bunch of people that take credit for it. All organizations are perfectly designed to get the results they get, right?
Right.
And so you can get good results and you can get bad results, but you're designed to get those results. So if you have a whole bunch of people that are leaving unhappy, you're designed for that. And what so goes the culture, so goes the company. So if your culture is to not care for people, that's how your company's designed, and that's how people are going to feel. And what sets the culture is leaders, how they act, how they model it, what they reinforce as far as behaviors. I define culture as everything an organization and the individuals, everything they say, everything they do, everything they don't say and don't do, and the relationship between the two. Doesn't matter what the pretty poster is up on the wall, on the website. Mm-hmm. It's, do you show up late for meetings? That's your culture. I love well, we got a nice Midwest culture. What does that mean? Right? Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? People always refer to it as a good thing, but so if you're sitting around a table and someone's going off talking about, hey, I'm going to go in this direction, and everyone around the table is going, oh my gosh, that's a disaster. You're landing the 747 in the woods, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to upset you.
You want to be nice.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say anything versus, wait a second, let's get that 747 on the runway. So let's redirect you over here. So if you have a culture that doesn't have the give feedback that way, or that's your culture. And Midwest culture can be great in some instances, and some it can't. But the leader dictates so that the leader can talk about, these are our values and stuff. But if they behave differently, oh my gosh, that's worse than even not having the values to start with. If the say-do is opposite there, you've just lost every bit of trust in the organization.
How does the leader do that? You want your followers, I'm hearing, to say, look, Bryan, I think you're ready to land that 747 in the woods. How do you get followers to be willing to look you dead in the eye and say, sir, I think you're wrong?
To me, there's a couple of hot buttons, and one is feedback. So
okay,
people will say feedback is positive or negative. Feedback is positive. Feedback's a positive thing, and it's either redirecting or reinforcing. So landing the 747 in the woods, hey, let's redirect that on the runway. That's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing, but people use it as negative.
All right.
And so the last thing I want, I've talked to people, I can give negative feedback. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sure you can. Because that's like berating someone. I don't want you to give negative feedback. I want you to redirect the person that's doing something into a positive way where they feel still good and they're going to take it and go, versus killing someone for it. Goes back to the hockey analogy of, hey, you screwed up. I can't believe it. That's negative feedback. Now you just crushed that person, and how many more people are getting crushed through that? And feedback is a muscle that needs to be built constantly forever. Every single leader, every single person. And you have to create an environment then, and it's not just giving feedback, it's receiving feedback. And that's where the leader comes in.
Go on, talk about that.
So I remember talking to a VP of operations once and said, well, have you ever asked for feedback in these plant manager meetings? Oh, yeah, I asked for feedback. They never given me any feedback. And I'm like, oh, I'm sure they don't.
And do you think that was feedback in and of itself?
I'm like, your nonverbals are screaming at me here saying, if you say one word. Was at a leadership conference once where a leader asked for questions. Top 50 leaders, I think, in the company. And someone asked a question, and the leader killed him for the stupid question that he asked. How many more questions did he get? It was crickets the rest of the day.
That's not a bet. That's an investment.
So the leader has to model, has to put themselves out there first, and especially if someone has the guts to give feedback, especially if it's in a public setting, to say thank you for that feedback. Thanks for doing that. Let me hear that. And then it's if you're receiving feedback, it doesn't mean you have to do anything, but you should listen to it. You shouldn't be defensive. You shouldn't justify anything. It's just listen and thank for the feedback. And you start building muscles. I remember the email that came out, and it's typical HR comes out because this is HR's responsible for this versus leaders. And it was sign up for giving and receiving feedback training. And I remember talking to the HR person. I said, I bet you if I put a stopwatch as far as when people actually saw the email and hit the delete button was probably under 2 seconds. And yet this is one of the biggest muscles we have to build because it sets the stage for absolutely everything, to be able to give feedback. And people talk about training and education. Education is, sort of the fertilizer, the water, things like that. Training goes back to like nurseries and roses. You're actually pruning. That's training a rose bush. You're actually unlearning certain things.
Okay.
And that's feedback. That's redirecting behavior, saying this behavior is not good. We need it over here. So you're actually, and unlearning things is extremely difficult. So you have to have an environment where people are willing to give feedback, but also receive it. And it's not an overnight thing. It's one of the, I still feel it's one of the biggest muscles that has to be built up in organizations.
And I'm hearing that has to be done lead by example from top down.
If it's not, leaders dictate culture. So leaders can say all day long, hey, we need feedback. I need you to go to that feedback training. And then someone gives them feedback. What do you think you're doing coming in here talking to me?
Right. What do you mean I need to go to the feedback training? I don't need to go to that damn training.
That will just trickle down. That's your culture.
I have found that, and you're right, I totally agree.
It's interesting that you talked a lot about influence, and you like having influence, and influence is important. And yet, when you were talking about the person who was resistant to this change, what I heard you say is you gave away your influence. And you said to him, okay, well, why don't you like it? And how would it be okay? And you let him influence the process. You delegate influence.
I feel the biggest way to influence somebody is to listen to them. Let them, they'll figure it out.
If they feel heard.
If they feel heard. And a lot of time, I would say most cases, people will not listen until you listen to them first. They will not listen to a thing you said. They'll block it out. And listening that's another muscle that is so stinking hard, because there's different phases of learning where you're not even paying attention, but you can hear noise, the Charlie Brown thing. You can listen to some of the words, but your mind's wandering. I think you can listen to 150 words a minute or something like that, and you can think of 500. So your mind's going. And so it's, how do you equalize the energy of the person that you're listening to? I love the Chinese character of listen. It has ears. It has, you have to be there. It has the eyes. It has the heart. And it's really being with someone and listening to them. And when you do that, that's how you build trust. That's how you build influence. Now you got them. I mean, Wilson Jones was one of the most phenomenal listeners. He would always ask about the person first before he would even say anything to him the other way. And he had everybody. I mean, everybody would do anything for him in regards to that. But he was so in tune with the individual person and caring for them.
And he genuinely cared.
And he cared. I mean, if you're just doing it just to
you read it in the book.
If you're not, that's again worst case scenario. If you just try to do it to manipulate people, it's not going to work.
And now a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
The Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh is focused on solving tomorrow's problems today. Corporations and other businesses in Northeast Wisconsin can utilize the center for threat analysis, incident response assistance, cybersecurity awareness and training programs, and professional development for technical and other staff. Learn more about the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at uwo.sh/cybersecurity. That's uwo.sh/cybersecurity.
You have a lot of responsibilities. There's a lot on your plate. And you could, from this nebulous job that Jim gave you years ago to et cetera, you could spend forever working. And you could spend forever doing volunteer work in the community. And you could spend forever with family. How do you take care of you? What do you do to make sure that you're okay and that you've invested in you?
One of the biggest things is my morning routine. So I try to be really disciplined to get up, and I have a strong faith. So I do a devotional every morning, which sets my mind and my attitude right for the day. And exercise is huge for me too. You got to stay strong, body, mind, and spirit. And then I have a core group of people that I talk to on a regular basis, accountability group, friends and stuff, just to bounce ideas off and making sure that I'm in a good spot mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and stuff. And so to me, it's never really been about the dollars and stuff like that. Those need to come. I'm all about results. I like to win. But to me, it's about building. I do a lot of coaching of hockey too. And to me, I never looked at building a state championship hockey team. I wanted to build strong leaders, future leaders through the sport of hockey. And I'm going to make you a really good hockey player and a hockey team in doing that. And we did win some state tournaments too. And we played every kid, because every kid has a role, and they deserve to feel what the stress is out there. Last thing I want to do is shorten the bench and start labeling kids early on, saying I can't go out there. And I have a lot of those kids come back and thank me for it. It's still Coach Brandt. They see me in the airport or whatever, and it's, hey, Coach Brandt. So to me,
that feels pretty good.
Absolutely. To me, if you can, to me, the biggest reward, and this is me. This is my leadership journey, is caring for people. And if I can sort of ignite power within people where I can give them the courage and confidence to take their lives to a place they never thought they could go, I've won.
That's the best part of leadership?
To me, that is. And so if they're building teams that are executing and they're healthy, they're arriving there in a healthy manner with their teams, that's huge. And the numbers should show up. Bill Walsh wrote a book, former coach of 49ers. Every coach right now has some direct line to him. The score will take care of itself was the title of the book. It wasn't about score more touchdowns. It's if I build a culture, the score will take care of itself. And now he was a genius strategist and everything like that. But it was about the process in building a culture. And you can't really control the scoreboard. You can't be banging your foot and score more touchdowns. It's, okay, what are we doing? How do we respond? And keep going. So to me, from a leadership standpoint, that's, if I can be building more and more strong, highly functional teams, and especially leaders that can build more and more teams that are highly functioning and healthy, that's huge. Anytime I get a lot of people asking, hey, can I bounce this off you? I love that. I love when people come in and want to talk leadership. And I'm not trying to teach. I learn just as much from them that they learn from me, and we have great discussions and go. So to me, this is fun, having a discussion like this. Yeah.
And it is a journey, right?
It's never over.
Ever over.
It's different phases, whether it's in business or, you're teaching now, which I think would be a blast. And I know you're having a blast doing that. And
the one thing I would say about retirement versus where you are in life is you cannot fill the leadership buzz that you, and I know you get it, and I get it, and Dale gets it. That's a hard buzz to fill when you don't have an organization that you can lead, like a wolf, right? You lead from the back.
Right.
You don't lead from the front.
Right.
And that's a hard gap to fill. But it's a journey. And if you think about your journey, Bryan, maybe one last question. This has all been great. Any regrets? Like do-overs?
My one regret was I wanted to play professional hockey, and I had a chance to go to Europe, and and
I don't
play.
think you ever told me that one.
And instead I came to Wisconsin and
selling packaging.
And selling packaging.
Well, it's almost the same.
And it's been a phenomenal career.
Yeah.
I really.
But you do wonder what would have happened if you got to Europe.
I have less teeth.
My wife always says, "Really, we have an awesome family. We have you." But from a business standpoint, I've been so fortunate. So the first coming over to Wisconsin, worked with a small company, Banner Packaging. The owner, I reported to the owner. He took me under his wing. Entrepreneurial. Next president was all about relationships, which I thrived on. And then I was thinking, gosh, it'd be nice. I don't have financial, I'd like to learn more of that. Jim came in and he brought that to me along with this leadership where we started sharpening that. And so I've had just really good fortune of great leaders along that I've learned totally different things from and picked up so much from them. And I just try to learn as much as I can from anybody. And I type, my dad to this day still sends me articles, that he thinks would be good for me to think about.
It's good for him too.
Oh, it's absolutely good. And I always comment back saying, oh yeah, that's good. What do you think about this? And ask him his advice on things. And I don't really have any regrets when it comes to my business life. I think I've just been really fortunate. I've gotten some great breaks with leaders that trust me to try some things out that we didn't know how it was going to end up.
Didn't know if this was a great idea or a bad idea.
Yeah.
We're going to find out together.
Yeah. And so I don't have.
What's good?
I'm sure there's a couple little things where, yeah, if I would have made that move, it would have been.
Yeah, of course.
But again,
I think it's more, if the people listening to this and watching this that are 30 something, is there one or two? I mean, there's 2 hours of advice buried in this 40-minute podcast that we'll eventually produce here. But what are the one or two things you'd say? Hey, I'm a new leader. I don't know what I got into, but I know I really want to do it. I've got passion. What are the one or two bits of advice, if you could take all this and summarize it for someone that's just getting their feet wet as a leader, Bryan?
I think the two things are our people are different. Every single one is a snowflake, and they come with a whole bunch of stuff, a whole bunch of awesome ingredients, whether it's baggage or great ingredients. Treat them as an individual that, for yourself, you might have wanted something. They might not want that. And so you gotta, if you want to get people unstuck and moving together, you gotta really listen to the individual. And that's the second thing is listen before you start, squawking and talking so much. Listen first. The power of listening is absolutely huge. And you usually can get them, again, people won't listen to you until they're listened to first. So it's listen to them. And when you're listening to them, put this thing down. Because that's the other thing. Yeah, what? Mm-hmm. Give them their full attention and truly listen to them. And they'll start having your back. And then you can start. And I think the third thing is you have to have a vision. Mm-hmm. You have to have a vision of where you're going. And it's not, hey, we're going to make this much more or 10%. It's a vision of this is what it's going to look like. It's going to feel like when you walk in, you're going to see this. You're going to hear that, the sound. There's going to be feedback. We're going to listen to each other. We're going to have fun. So I think it's all about people listening and then have a vision. You have to have a vision out there.
Agree.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much
for
spending some of your valuable time with us and sharing with all the folks listening to the podcast your very useful insights.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. This is great.
It has been our pleasure.
Best of luck, and good luck with the career.
Yeah.
And all the influence and the difference you make in the lives of the people that you touch, because it's rare and it's great to see. So thank you.
Good.
It's Time is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs in association with Venture Project Studios. Executive producer, Aaron J. Armstrong. Host, Professor Dale Feinauer. Creative Director, Madison Potratz. Director of Photography, Elazar Kloon. Audio and Video Editor, Elazar Kloon. Marketing Strategy, Tara Larson. Social Media, Anwar Mahana. A special thanks to L Creative, Top View Media, Michael Patton, and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business graduate programs.